Welcome. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Welcome to our series of free monthly talks on sustainability, climate change, and the world that we live in today. So each month so far this year, either myself, so I'm Josie, I'm co-founder at Capture, or the wonderful Ashley Bishop, who's co-founder at Bagboard, we'll be speaking to a diverse range of subject matter experts, and we're delighted to have you all join the conversation today. So thanks very much for being a part of this. Just quickly before we jump in with Zach, for those of you who are new to Bagboard or Capture, Bagboard is a conscious shopping platform based in the UK, which empowers you to promote, pick and purchase from brands who are kind to people and the planet. You can find more about them via bagboard.com. They very excitingly launched their app this week, so it's a super exciting time for them, so definitely check them out. And then here at Capture, we are a sustainability engagement app and platform. So we have a free app designed to help you track and reduce CO2 emissions from everyday travel choices. And you can find out more about us via the capture.club. So today we're going to be exploring the links between our money and the climate crisis. And today we have with us a very special guest, Zach Gottlieb, the co-founder of Bank.Green, which is a site that seeks to help everyday people make value-driven choices about who they bank with and how. So we're going to be starting with Zach's journey into co-founding Bank.Green, which is super exciting. I'm very interested to hear that as well myself. We're going to be then diving into more of the problem. What is the link between a high street bank and the climate crisis? We'll be looking at greenwashing as well, what we can do as individuals, and then finishing up with a Q&A too. So as always, if we can kindly ask you to keep yourself on mute, and please drop any questions at any time as well in the comments box, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end as well. So thank you. So here we go. So welcome, Zach. Thank you so much for being with us today. Really, really happy to have you join us. I've gone through Bank.Green. It's an incredible website. I was pretty horrified to find that one of my banks was, I think in the top 2 worst for funding fossil fuel projects. So thank you very much for the work that you guys have been doing. It would be great just to start off, if you wouldn't mind, with a brief intro to yourself and really how you ended up co-founding Bank.Green.
Of course. Thank you, Josie, and thanks for having me here. So I first got involved in the climate movement towards the end of 2019, I want to say. Just had a feeling that I'd kind of got well into my 30s and hadn't really done enough social good in my life. And so I joined to a climate movement and was helping them with digital marketing in their website and things like that, because that's what I do professionally. And I was doing that for about, I want to say sort of 16 months, that kind of time. And in that time, one of the roles I was performing was to manage the blog and to, I had a team of writers who were writing educational content about the climate crisis. And one of the articles that one of our writers wanted to write was, the title of it was How to Stop Funding Fossil Fuels by Moving Your Money to a Sustainable Bank. And he collared me and he said, this is this incredible issue that no one's talking about, which is that we unknowingly, we the public, are complicit in the climate crisis because our money is actually being used against us, and nobody's talking about it because it's like the bank's dirty little secret. And so I was very curious, and he wrote a fantastic article which did very well. I think it got 10,000 page views. I mean, we had very well subscribed social accounts and stuff, but it was very engaging. Lots of people were talking about it. And it really showed to me that once people had this sort of aha moment, it was a really galvanizing topic for them that more should be done about. So from that kind of snowballed this idea, like maybe we should turn this into an action or like a demonstration. And then from that, the initial idea was like, let's get a huge group of people to kind of call their banks, clog the phone lines, and express, their concern to their banks, which is actually a very effective method that we do advocate. But then eventually we thought that this could be a much wider initiative, and that we really wanted to bring the public along with us, since it was their bank deposits that were being used. And in order to do that, we probably had to kind of shed the skin of the climate movement we're in, which was, because not everyone is ready to become a climate activist. But there is a huge pool of people who do want to do more than just recycle. And we want to help to reach those people and bring them on board at the level of engagement that they're happy with. Anyone can switch their bank account. You don't have to be like a huge climate activist to do that. So then eventually, as I said, it snowballed and eventually became a website which allows people to go on and check their own bank's climate record, which we think is a very crucial first step to understanding your, unknowing complicity in the climate crisis. And then, we obviously encourage people to actually switch to a sustainable bank as well as take various other kinds of climate action. And so we launched our first campaign in April, and we've been trying to build on that momentum since then.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thanks very much. It's great to hear. All right. So for a beginner then, it would just be great to kind of dive into what exactly is the problem here. I know that Bank.Green states on their website that during the 5 years following the Paris Agreement, the world's top 60 private sector banks pumped 3.8 trillion into fossil fuels. So why is this happening? What's the connection really between our personal finances and the climate crisis? So our high street bank, how is this happening that perhaps a little money in my savings account could be making it into the fossil fuel industry?
Yeah, so it's a conception that most people have really of their bank accounts is that their money is just kind of idly sitting there, not really doing much. And that's what the banks want you to think. And it's just like a piggy bank, right? But it's not. It's actually not. And customers' deposits can not themselves be lended, but they can be lended against. So they're used as a form of collateral on the banks as a way of saying, we've got this money to cover things. It's part of a whole system called fractional reserve banking that is a bit beyond the scope of this call. But it allows them to lend sometimes on leverage. They can lend more than is actually in the account to any company or project that they want to get profit from. And fossil fuel projects, for better or worse, and companies still allow them to achieve that profit. They do a lot of lending directly, for which they receive interest back on the loan. And then they also do a lot of underwriting, issuing shares, that kind of thing, for which they receive a fee to these fossil fuel companies. And so that's really the connection, is that your bank account isn't a piggy bank. It is enabling the banks to fund the very source of the entire crisis we're in right now. And so you as a customer have some power there to try to steer things in a different direction. And obviously one very effective way of doing that is to show your displeasure to the bank by actually closing your account and moving to a sustainable bank account.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I'm guessing from a business perspective, these banks are sort of lending out to large fossil fuel projects, which just to be sure, are we talking about kind of the development of, let's say, like a new oil fields or a new kind of gas pipeline, or I mean, what sort of
all of the above? Yeah. 90% is given to the companies, the sort of energy companies mostly that are doing these for infrastructure projects, but they also do project financing as well, specifically for as you say, pipelines, oil fields, natural gas extraction, you name it, all of the above.
Absolutely. And of course they're doing that because it's profitable for them, allowing them to make more returns for their shareholders, customers.
Right. It's a clear case of them prioritizing short-term profit over the climate goals.
Got it. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
So obviously, I presume this has been going on for decades. Why is urgent action needed today? Why can't we just kind of keep going on as we have been, I suppose?
Yeah, well, I think it's probably, I'd give the same answer to that as, why should we take any climate action more urgently today than 10 years ago and 20 years ago? And that, for that, we defer to the scientists and the IPCC, who came out a few years ago with a report saying that we need to take urgent action. You just need to look around. That you mentioned before we started, Josie, the floods in Germany that have happened, in Belgium, Netherlands, hottest temperatures ever recorded recently in Turkey, in Canada a few weeks ago. What more evidence do you need that we're in the midst of a crisis? And so that's why we need to take action now more than ever, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, awesome. So one piece that I now wanted to touch on, which I know can be a bit confusing for I guess the general public, really. So I know that typically we seem to be bombarded, I don't know whether it's now more than ever, with advertisements about all the good that banks are doing. And indeed, there does seem to be some significant activity behind these adverts. So, for example, I know that in 2020, Lloyds Banking Group provided £2.3 billion of green funding to businesses. And in 2021, apparently it's expanding the funding available under the Green Finance Initiatives from 3 billion to 5 billion to support the green transition. I mean, obviously there's a lot of advertising telling us that banks are doing good, and that indeed, they are, putting, upfront large sums of money to support that. But does the good come anywhere near to balancing out the bad when it comes to sort of looking at banks overall and their position on climate change right now?
The short answer is no. Let me, if you want, I can share my screen.
Yeah, that would be great.
Kind of expand on the answer I just gave, and also explain that, because there's different types of financing that's taking place. Some of it's for maintaining fossil fuel infrastructure, and there's a separate debate to be had there as to not wanting to have stranded assets in the economy, which could also very badly disrupt the economy, and talk of a just transition and things like that. And then there's a second part, which is actually looking for new fossil fuel reserves and expanding fossil fuels. And a huge portion of this financing we're talking about is going towards looking for new oil and gas reserves, mostly, also coal in many cases. And so in that context, let me just quickly share my screen. Oh, I think you need to enable it, Josie.
Sorry about that. Do you know what? I'm not 100% sure.
Oh, it should be in the bottom where it says share screen. There should be a little arrow thing next to it. But
I can do advanced sharing options. Okay, who can share? All participants.
That's okay. I can talk through it if not.
I think you can share now, Zach.
Okay, let me just try. I can indeed. So 1 second. Yeah, so I'm just going to share one quick chart that I find very helpful to explaining, again, the urgency and why, doing all of this clean energy, renewable investment is not enough to balance out what they're doing with the other hand. And so this is from a very influential report by an NGO called Oil Change International. And what it shows here is the carbon budget, which, for those who aren't sure what the carbon budget is, it's the amount of CO2 that we can emit before reaching a certain global temperature increase. So what you have there in the middle is 1.5 degrees, which was set by the Paris Agreement, as the goal that we need to reach to stay below. And ideally, 2 degrees was set as the hard limit, and ideally we want to stay below 1.5, right? So that amounts to 700 gigatons of carbon dioxide, and that budget was recorded January of last year, which means that from January of last year going forward, we have 700 gigatons before we stand a 50-50 chance of avoiding that 1.5 degrees carbon budget. And then over on the right side, you see 2 degrees. So 2 degrees carbon budget is roughly double. So that's about 1,200 gigatons. If we want to stand a 2/3 chance, it's the opposite. If we want to stand a third chance of avoiding 2 degrees, right? So if we emit over 1,000 gigatons, then there is a 2 in 3 chance we're going to hit 2 degrees. Okay. And so the reason I'm showing you these is because if we move over to the left, you can see all of the potential carbon emissions from all of the reserves of fossil fuels that have already been developed. They've already been extracted. There's already infrastructure to support them. And if we burn all of them, then that on its own is enough to put us over the 2 degree trajectory, which the whole world agreed in the Paris Agreement was we were going to avoid it, right? So now you begin to see why no more extraction or expansion of fossil fuels can be supported, right? So again, there's that one discussion about what should we do about maintaining all of this that's already done, and how can we unwind that in a way that's safe and just for everybody? But then there's this whole other conversation, and as long as banks are expanding their fossil fuel exploration and extraction, then there is just zero justification. There can be no new oil fields, coal mines, coal plants, any of this. And these major banks we're talking about, they are still funding that. So how can somebody claim to care about the environment and about the future of having a livable planet if they are still doing this? So yeah, I'm not saying we should put down those sustainable projects and the renewable energy. I mean, it's great that we need that, but you can't really sincerely claim to really care about people and planet if you're still funding fossil fuel expansion. So yeah, that was what I wanted to share on that.
That's really helpful. That was really clear. Thank you. I think it's really
Yeah.
good to sort of put this in perspective, because often, yeah, you do hear about a couple of people saying, oh, you know, this new pipeline might go ahead, or this project might go ahead, and it's, you know, it's difficult to sort of get your head around the fact that it's like, no, if we burn everything that we've already extracted, or I presume plan to extract / stored somewhere, we're going to be in a terrible situation, even if we, as you said, sort of stop all expansion literally today. So that's really nice to sort of have that perspective. So with that in mind, then it would be great to talk a little bit more about, you know, what can we do as individuals. So I wanted to take HSBC as an example here. So on the ESG and responsible business section of their website, their group chief executive, I think someone called Noel Quinn, this is a quote from them. So, because I'm talking about here every day, you know, the members of the public trying to do research on sustainable banks. So they've said, how we do business is as important as what we do. Reporting on our environmental, social, and governance performance transparently is essential to building stakeholder confidence and creating value for all our stakeholders. Our ESG review, together with other publications, accords with our reporting obligations under the terms of the UN Global Compact and renews our commitment to the Compact's principles. Okay, so you've got that on their website, which, you know, reading that is quite difficult to really understand. It just sounds to me like they've said that they're going to report things. When you go to Bank.Green,
that is what it said. That's all it said.
Yeah, okay. When you go to Bank.Green and you look up HSBC, it states that they are number 2 in the UK for fossil fuel financing. So how do we begin to wrap our heads around what's really going on when it comes to our personal finances and the climate crisis? And it would just be great to hear some practical steps and tips from you on all of this.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, just coming back to what I just said there, there's all kinds of alliances and coalitions and feel-good organizations that these organizations sign up to, or these banks sign up to. And very often you find that they're about what are called scope 2 and scope 3 emissions, which refer to the insulation in the office buildings, or employee perks about cycling to work, or things like that, in terms of sort of the actual day-to-day running of the business, right? But what we're talking about here is scope 3 emissions, and lending falls into that when we're talking about other external third parties. And so, often these alliances are much more focused on the business themselves and sort of the day-to-day running, which makes it very easy for banks to sign up to them and say, hey, look at us, we're being so environmental. It's like, but hang on, what are you doing over here? And so, the UN Global Compact, the Principles of Responsible Banking is another one that the UN has, and they're always very vague. They don't, I'm not having a massive go at the UN right now, like they do a lot of good as well. But if we really want to make an impact and we want to have one of these alliances that actually matters, it needs to start with the actual linchpin of the climate crisis, which is, are you continuing to enable it through your activities? And it's a very binary issue for us at Bank Green, at least. It's like, you are or you're not. If you're still funding expansion of fossil fuels, then how can you claim to be environmentally friendly? So yeah, I would encourage no one to be fooled by these types of signatory agreements and all, we call it greenwashing, that a lot of these banks are doing. They make a lot of noise about their sustainable investments to make people think that they actually care. But as I was saying earlier, you dig a little bit deeper, you just have to peel 1 or 2 layers deep on the onion, and you see that they really don't. And so in terms of action, obviously, as I mentioned a few times now, on Bank Green, we have, you can select your country and you can see what we consider the top 3 sustainable options in that country. So that's a huge form of light activism, you could say, that we encourage people to take, to actually switch and take their money away from fossil fuels. And then your money can actually be used for good. There are amazing banks like Triodos in the UK and elsewhere in Europe, for example, who do nothing but fund, amazing renewable energy projects and clean energy networks. So then you can actually feel good about what your money is doing. And then it's very important, if you do make the switch, to let your last bank know why you're actually doing that, right? Because that's the only way that we're going to build this pressure, is by making it very clear to the banks that their customers' potential and and current are not happy with their activities. And this, we understand that not everyone is able to switch banks, right? Maybe you really love your banks because of the services it offers. Maybe you're stuck in a mortgage for the next few years or tied into some other financial products. And that's okay. No one should ever feel guilty or bad for the level of, action that they're able to take. And what we say to those people is that there are still lots of ways you can take action. One is to start talking to people, your friends and family, and maybe they're ready to switch, and explaining to them, raise this awareness, right? Because a recent survey found that 80% of HSBC and Barclays customers actually were unaware that any of this is taking place. So you can be a crucial part of that awareness building by talking to people. And one of those could be your bank, right? Actually call your bank and say to them, what's going on? I'm really concerned about my future, my children's future, when I've learned that you still funded, in the case of HSBC, $20 billion or financed $20 billion of fossil fuel companies last year. How can that be compatible with a livable future? And who can I talk to about this? And we really encourage that, and make sure your call is logged, and those logs build up. And a lot of these banks even have investor relations lines, and it's almost better to call them because they have a direct line to the senior management. And you need to start those conversations, and eventually enough consumer pressure, enough customer pressure will build that the banks will actually start to take this more seriously than they are, and give us a fighting chance.
Very cool. I love it. Fantastic. And people can find bank.green by simply just searching for it's just bank.green, right?
Bank.green, yeah. It's one of those new URLs that allows you to have a color at the end of it.
Love it. Nice and easy. Fantastic stuff. All right. Well, thank you very much, Zach. It would be great to move on to kind of any questions that anyone might have in the audience. So I think one question was asked a little earlier. So should we'll just get to that one first, Zach. So somebody asked whether you were aware of the Gale Go Around initiative.
Go Around, yeah.
Yes, apologies if I've mispronounced that. Yeah, it would just be great. Are there other initiatives out there, I guess, as well? Would be great to ask.
Yeah. So we're not experts on sustainable investment. We are, if anything, experts on fossil finance. I wouldn't even call us experts on fossil finance, but we know what needs to be known to know that this is a huge issue. Our mission is really to try and encourage as many people as possible to make a noise about this. So I'm interested in it. I know there's others, in the US, there's one called As You Sow, that's, very geared towards sustainable investment education. I think there's another one called actually Sustainable Investments in the US. We're a little bit more geared towards focusing on the US at the moment, partly because that's where the biggest and the worst fossil banks are. But no, that sounds really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of greenwash, as I was saying. So it really is needed is organizations to kind of sift through this and find out what's actually real and what's just puffery and what's just banks, trying to trick you into thinking that this isn't a green investment when actually it's not. So, but yeah, thank you, Eric, for letting me know. I'll definitely put that on my watch list.
Very cool. Thanks, guys. So there was another question which has come up, which is, are there any kind of certifications for banks? It's almost like if people are searching for organic food in the supermarkets, they'll see there's an organic section or an organic label, or I don't know, gluten-free or whatever it is. It's pretty easy. But when it comes to, I guess, choosing a high street bank, are there any certifications that are out there or that that are being developed or worked on that might just sort of help people make an easier decision?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. The two that are currently kind of leading the pack are called B Corp, or B Impact Assessment. It doesn't just apply to banks, but they evaluate a whole spectrum of kind of ESG considerations. So by and large, if it scores you can sort of Google B Impact Assessment and actually type in the name of the bank or the customer and see if it comes up. And if it scores well there, then for the most part, you're probably going to be fine. But definitely ask and ask the bank about their position on fossil fuels. And the other one is the Global Alliance on Banking Values, or GABV. And by and large, most of the banks in those two assessments score very well on environment. That is not to say that they are all fossil free. There are definitely examples of ones that aren't, but they're certainly not the most egregious offenders if they are. So as for this very specific issue of fossil free, which we consider the most important for reasons I've provided, we are actually in the process of launching such a certification. And if you go on the bank.green website, you can scroll to the footer and it says fossil free certification. And then there is a a page there which outlines our approach. And I think we're hopefully not very far from having our first bank in New York actually sign on to this, because their local community members have asked the very same question. They're like, it's so hard, there is not a huge number of sustainable banks out there at the moment. And if people are making this decision to pull their money away from fossil fuels, it does tend to go hand in hand with putting them in a sustainable bank. And the problem is there aren't that many locations, and a lot of people like to sort of be able to walk into their bank and that kind of thing. So there are a big community in New York who've said that they really want this type of a certification to exist, so that they know, because they know some of the banks in their community are fossil free, but they're just not advertising it. So at the moment, as far as we're aware, we're the only one, but we're very early stage. But if you keep following us, then of course we'll keep updating you. And if you have particular banks you wanted us to approach about it, then we'll be happy to consider that as well.
Very cool. Oh, that's awesome to hear. Well, that'll be very exciting to look out for. So I wish you guys all the very best with that.
Thank you.
Brilliant stuff. All right. Well, I think we're pretty much up to time now. So unless we have any more questions that are dropped in the last minute or so, I'd just like to say a huge thank you, Zach, for your time and for coming to have a chat with us about this really important topic. Which I think obviously a lot of us aren't so aware of. So hopefully everyone, if you haven't checked it out already, please go head to bank.green, have a look and see how your bank does. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to get in touch. If you get in touch with me, I could see if I can help introduce you to Zach. Or Zach, how's the best way for folks to reach you if they want to ask a question or ask anything to bank.green?
Yeah, I think my email is probably best, just zach@bank.green. ZAK is how I spell my first name, and I'd love to hear from you. Yeah.
Nice. Easy. All right, fantastic stuff. All right, brilliant. Well, thank you so much then for everyone for joining us today. Please keep an eye out for the Capture app and at bagboard.com as well for news about future talks that are coming up as well. So yeah, thank you very much again for joining us, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your Friday and a great weekend ahead. Thank you. Thanks again, Zach.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks then. Bye.